everyone and welcome. I'm Dr. Sonia and I want to talk about something extremely important yet neglected. When we are faced with trauma or adversity, we give and take a lot of help to fix the physical issues. But what about the psychological issues? We need to address psychological trauma, especially right now when showing emotions is considered to be weaker or uncool and being stoic is considered to be cooler or stronger. We are human after all. We feel emotions. So giving each other that room to feel and heal is the least we can do. So the question is, what is the solution? Now there are two options. The first one is psychotherapy and counseling. Now in this we help the person grow beyond their current state and we help the person develop skills to resist any future trauma. The second option is psychological first aid or PFA, which is defined as compassionate and supportive presence designed to mitigate acute distress and assess the need for continued mental health care. So, psychological first aid is used to stabilize and mitigate acute distress or sudden distress. This is not for some long-term psychological growth as in psychotherapy and counseling. So, which one is better? Acute phase psychological first aid has been proven to be better than multi-session counseling because the latter delays, complicates, and destabilizes recovery. Now, we must remember that psychological first aid is not a therapy or diagnosis. It is simply providing relief and support to someone who has gone through trauma so that the person is able to eventually function independently, slowly but surely. The Johns Hopkins model has been tested for 15 to 20 years and it is a very useful tool for us to use, and I say this because you do not need to be a doctor to be able to understand and use this. The first one is reflective listening and rapport. So reflective listening is that we act like a mirror. It's also called active listening. Now what we've got to understand is when we listen to somebody, the person finds a sense of value, especially if we empathize with the person. When the person finds a sense of value and support, then the person tends to trust us, and when the person trusts us, it leads to compliance. Now, empathy is to feel as the other feels versus sympathy, which is to feel for someone. So when we speak with the person, we need to keep in mind and behave as though we are sitting next to the person or beside the person and having a conversation instead of sitting across the table with the person like in an interrogation room. So what are you going to do? First, introduce yourself. Second, explain what you are doing. Third is to ask an initial question. And the fourth is to do a summary paraphrase. So when you ask a question, there are two types. One is a close-ended question and the other is an open-ended question. It's always better to ask an open-ended question because it allows the person to really open up and talk about the feelings and the trauma that the person has experienced. Now, during this, do not invalidate the trauma, do not compare the trauma, acknowledge it, do not give unsolicited opinions or advice. When you do a summary paraphrase, you take someone's words and rephrase the co-content into your own words. Something like, sounds to me like this has been hard on you. So, in other words, you've lost everything. So here you're behaving as a human mirror and reflecting back the person's emotional state, so the person feels heard. Allow for catharsis and venting. Do not rush, interrupt or argue with the survivor when he or she is speaking, and always remember that a sense of interpersonal support or social support is the single best predictor of human resilience. So essentially, just being there is all it takes to make someone feel better. The second is assessment. Now here we try to identify the cases that are most severe and require immediate attention. Here the intervention is based on unique needs because we recognize that each person is different and unique. Here we've got to listen to the story and ask specific questions, ask open-ended questions. There are three groups of survivors: eustress, distress and dysfunction. The eustress group, they seem optimistic, and for them, no action is required as such, just stay available. The second group, that is distress, they present with mild depression. For them, identify, assess, and monitor. The third is dysfunction. So here they have severe depression and they have incapacitation. So identify, assess, and take action or intervene. Do not interfere with the natural recovery of a survivor. Now, here are some signs and symptoms we need to watch out for. In the distress group, the cognitive reactions are temporary confusion, inability to concentrate, reduced problem-solving capacity, they seem overwhelmed, obsessive, they tend to relive the event, and they have nightmares. In the dysfunction group, incapacitating confusion, diminished cognitive capacity, self-defeating behavior, hopelessness, suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, hallucinations, paranoid delusions, or suspicious belief. Now, the emotional reactions. The distress group shows with fear, sadness, irritability, anger, frustration, and anxiety. In the dysfunction group, there is one very classic sign. They say that I thought I was about to die, and you see their pupils dilate. So they end up taking irrational actions because of this. Now, they have extreme anxiety and panic attacks, immobilizing depression, affective numbing, PTSD, which is a combination of reliving the event, nightmares, anxiety, and hypervigilance. Coming to the behavioral reactions, the distress group shows temporary phobic avoidance, compulsions, hoarding, sleep disturbance, eating disturbance, and they get easily startled. Dysfunction group shows persistent avoidance, immobilizing compulsions, aggression and violence, reclusiveness, impulsiveness or risk-taking behavior, self-medication, alcohol, substance abuse, and energy drinks. Spiritual reactions. In the distress group, they question faith and they question God's actions. In the dysfunction group, they stop faith-related practices, and the polar opposite is that they project their faith onto others. That is, they may say that this adversity occurred in your life because you did not have this faith, or if you follow this particular faith, then you would not go through this sort of an adversity in the future. The physiological changes. In the distress group, there are changes in appetite, changes in libido, psychogenic headaches, muscle aches or spasms, decreased immunity. Note that any prolonged physical or psychological changes or any symptoms of concern should be evaluated by a medical professional. Now, in the dysfunction group, there are going to be changes in cardiac function, changes in gastrointestinal tract function, appearance of occult blood, unconsciousness, chest pain, dizziness, numbness, paralysis, especially of the arm, leg, and face, and inability to speak or understand speech. Remember to remain neutral, assist, do not condemn or judge. Do not say things like, "You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you?" or "You're looking depressed." The third thing is prioritization. Emphasis is placed upon assessing basic functional capacity. According to Maslow, there are basic medical and physical needs that have to be met first. So when in doubt, assume that a medical need must be met. So when we assess the survivors and we find that the survivor falls in the dysfunction category, then we prioritize intervention for this survivor. Number 4 is intervention. Now, there are two types of intervention. In the first case, if the person seems psychologically unstable, then stabilize acute arousal, and that is by removing anything that provokes the person. Give some work, that is, encourage a task focus. This will help the survivor divert attention from trying to take any impulsive actions and try to delay impulsive actions. That is, say something like, Perhaps this isn't the right time to take such a big life decision, and allow venting, allow catharsis. If the survivor is receptive, is optimistic, and is looking for guidance, then provide tips and guidance on how to go on. Reassure the survivor and instill hope. Give stress management techniques and also give some perspective, that is another way of looking at the trauma. So, all in all, first introduce yourself, explain the purpose of your presence, ask what happened and about the well being of the survivor, ask open ended questions. Then, if the survivor has mentioned words like depression and anxiety, then make sure you ask to clarify. You may ask, so what do you mean by depression? What do you mean by anxiety? Or how exactly do you feel? If a survivor has any misunderstanding or misbelief related to their feelings, then we need to clarify it for them. Then normalize their feelings. You may say, what you're going through is tough and this is a completely normal reaction you're experiencing. Tell them about what they may expect. So you can say, don't be sad if you start feeling sad suddenly or if you start crying suddenly. Explain the importance of optimism. Explain the importance of interpersonal support. So you may say, it is okay to rely on others, it's completely fine. Speaking of which, what can I do right now for you? The fifth is disposition and follow up. Here, the decision is based on if the survivor has to be referred to a higher level of care or not. So, after intervention, if the person is capable of taking care of himself or herself, then intervention has ended. It is recommended that you follow up with the person at some point. Now, a rule of thumb is that at least one follow up is mandatory. Sometimes a second follow up may be useful. If a third follow up is indicated, it is probably time to refer the survivor to a higher level of care. So remember, stabilize, mitigate or relieve, and facilitate to the next level of care if required. I hope these tried and tested tools would be helpful, and I'd like to say this again that yes, we're human. It's completely fine to feel emotions and to express or hear someone else expressing their emotions. It's completely fine to lean on each other, especially when we are faced with adversity. So, as much as we feel hopeless in situations and feel that we cannot do anything to turn the situation around in our favor, I feel strongly that this is a great opportunity for us to take things in our hand and create a safety net for us to heal ourselves and also help others heal. So, here's me wishing all of you love and light. We've got this.